The crystal bell chimed softly as the glass door of Lawson Reed Jewelers swung open, letting in the spring sunshine that flooded Manhattan's Fifth Avenue. Diamonds danced in 1,000 golden reflections across the Italian marble floor, each footstep echoing through the opulent space like a symphony of wealth and exclusivity. Harper Lane gripped her Aunt Marianne's hand tighter, her 9-year-old eyes widening at the sheer brilliance surrounding her. She wore a simple light blue cotton dress, white sneakers worn thin at the toes, and a unicorn backpack that suddenly felt childish in this temple of sophistication. Her brown hair hung in 2 hastily braided pigtails, tied with mismatched elastic bands. "Aunt Marie, it's even more beautiful than I imagined," Harper whispered, her voice trembling with wonder. Marianne Collins smiled tenderly, adjusting her own worn brown wool coat. At 42, the public school teacher had hands roughened by work and eyes that carried an ancient sadness since her brother and sister-in-law had departed 2 years ago on a humanitarian mission to Africa. She'd become mother to little Harper. "You deserve to be here, sweetheart. Never forget that," Marianne murmured, squeezing her niece's hand. But the looks had already begun. Vivian Brooks, a saleswoman with platinum blonde hair pulled into an immaculate bun, observed aunt and niece with a raised eyebrow. Her red lips curved into a false smile as she discreetly nudged the colleague beside her. "Tourists," she whispered to Rachel, another salesperson. "Probably just want to take photos for Instagram." Rachel stifled a giggle, pretending to organize a tray of rings. Harper approached the central counter timidly, where a special display case showcased a single piece. The Aurora Promise necklace. The jewel was breathtaking. A sky-blue sapphire pendant surrounded by small diamonds, suspended on a white gold chain that seemed to capture the very light of dawn. "Excuse me," Harper's voice was barely a whisper. "I'd like to see that necklace, please." Vivian approached with calculated steps, her expensive perfume invading the air. She looked Harper up and down, her cold blue eyes traveling over the simple dress. "Worn sneakers, childish backpack. Sweetheart, this piece isn't for playing pretend," Vivian said, her voice sweet but venomous underneath. "It's a very special jewel, very expensive. Perhaps you'd prefer to look at our costume jewelry section in the store next door." Harper's face flushed red. Marianne felt her niece's hand tremble. "My niece asked a polite question," Marianne intervened, keeping her voice steady. "She would like to see the necklace, please." Vivian sighed dramatically, as if being forced to perform an absurd task. "Look, I understand you want to dream, but this piece costs $250,000. It's better not to create unrealistic expectations for the child." At a table in the back of the store, Elliot Warner looked up from the catalogue he was examining. At 38, the businessman had entered discreetly 20 minutes earlier, searching for a birthday gift for his mother. His dark eyes narrowed as he observed the scene unfolding. Harper took a deep breath. Something inside her, perhaps the memory of her mother's last words before the trip, "Always be brave, my love," made her lift her chin. "I'm not playing," Harper said, her voice still soft but firm. "I came here with a purpose. My parents left me something special for this day." Vivian crossed her arms, the fake smile still on her face. "Of course they did, sweetheart. How cute." That's when Cynthia Hale, the store manager, approached. A middle-aged woman in an impeccable grey suit and designer glasses. She'd built her career protecting the exclusivity of Lawson Reed Jewelers. "Is there a problem here?" Cynthia asked, her tone making it clear that the problem was Harper and Marianne. "No problem, Mrs. Hale," Vivian responded quickly, "just explaining that perhaps this isn't the appropriate store for this type of visit." Marianne felt anger boil, but before she could respond, Harper released her hand and opened her small unicorn backpack. The silence that followed would be remembered by everyone present that day. Harper withdrew a small navy blue velvet box from her backpack. Worn at the edges from time and the affection with which it had been kept, her small hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue paper, was a sealed envelope and a special bank card, black with golden details. On the envelope, in her mother's elegant handwriting, was written, "For the day you choose your promise. My parents." Harper's voice failed for a moment, and she swallowed hard. "My parents left this for me before they departed. They said when I turned 9, I could choose something that meant hope, something that would remind me they'd always come back." Marianne placed her hand on her niece's shoulder. Eyes brimming with tears, she knew what that box represented, the last tangible promise from Sarah and Thomas Lane before they boarded for Mozambique, where they'd work building schools in remote villages. Elliot Warner stood silently from his table and approached, maintaining respectful distance. Something about that little girl's dignity moved him deeply. Vivian, however, let out a nervous laugh. "A card. Sweetheart, anyone can have a card. That doesn't mean—" "Vivian," Cynthia cut in, hesitant for the first time. Her years of experience had taught her to recognize unexpected clients. "Perhaps we should—" "Verify." Harper extended the card with steady hands, despite her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Please, I just want to see the necklace. I just want to know if it's as special as it seems, because my parents always said hope is the most expensive thing in the world. And I wanted something that showed that." Cynthia took the card with hesitant fingers. It was a black card from a Swiss banking institution with the name of a trust fund engraved, "Harper Lane Trust, for Sacred Promises." She ran it through the reader. The machine beeped. "Transaction approved. Available limit 500,000 guz." Vivian's face turned white as the marble floor. Rachel dropped a tray of earrings, which clattered as they scattered. Cynthia needed to grip the counter for support. Elliot smiled discreetly, crossing his arms. "Well," he said, his deep voice breaking the stunned silence, "I believe the young lady would like to see the necklace now, wouldn't you say?" Harper turned to him, and for the first time since entering the store, she showed a genuine smile. It was a smile that illuminated her entire face, revealing a gap between her front teeth where a baby tooth had recently fallen out. "Thank you, sir," she said simply. Elliot knelt to be at her height, his kind eyes meeting hers. "You know, I have a daughter a bit older than you, and I hope that if she ever comes to a place like this, someone treats her with half the dignity you've shown today. You're very brave." "My parents said courage isn't not being afraid," Harper responded, with the innocent wisdom of children. "It's doing the right thing, even when you're scared." Marianne had to look away, tears finally streaming down her face. The electronic beep of the approved transaction still echoed in the sudden silence that had engulfed Lawson and Reed. Vivian stood frozen, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the edge of the display case until her knuckles turned white. The color had drained from her face, leaving only 2 bright spots of rouge on her cheeks, like a porcelain doll, cracking at the seams. Rachel bent down quickly to gather the scattered earrings, her fingers fumbling. Dropping them twice more in her haste, the sound of gold and diamonds hitting marble punctuated the uncomfortable quiet. Cynthia removed her glasses with trembling hands, cleaning them on her blazer, though they didn't need it. A nervous habit she'd developed over 15 years in luxury retail. She looked from the card reader's screen to Harper's face, then back again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something that made sense in her worldview. I'll retrieve the Aurora promise immediately," Cynthia finally managed, her voice stripped of its earlier condescension. "Vivian, please prepare the VIP room for Miss Lane." Vivian opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. I didn't know. I mean, I couldn't have—" "No," Marianne cut in, her voice low but carrying a weight that made everyone in the immediate vicinity flinch. "You didn't know because you decided not to ask. You decided to judge a child by her dress, by her shoes. My niece lost her parents to an ideal of goodness you clearly don't understand." I'm so sorry," Vivian murmured, but the words sounded hollow. Rehearsed, the apology of someone more concerned with consequences than genuine remorse. Harper looked at Vivian with those enormous brown eyes, and something in that gaze, pure and unflinching, made the saleswoman take an involuntary step backward. "It's okay," the little girl said, with disconcerting sincerity. Sometimes people forget that everyone has a story. My teacher says that. I forgive you. The unexpected forgiveness, coming from a child who'd been humiliated, cut deeper than any accusation could have. Vivian's carefully constructed composure crumbled, and she turned away, one hand covering her mouth. Elliot extended his hand to Harper. Come, I'll accompany you to see the necklace. If you'll permit me, of course. Harper looked at Marianne, who nodded with a proud smile tinged with lingering anger. The girl accepted Elliot's hand, his palm warm and calloused, a working man's hand, despite the expensive suit. What's your name? Harper asked as they walked, her small fingers wrapped around his index and middle finger. Elliot Warner. And I already know yours, the brave Harper Lane. Do you have children? A daughter? Emma, she's 12 and loves astronomy. I like stars too. Harper's eyes lit up, the earlier tension melting from her small shoulders. My parents sent a letter saying that in the villages where they are, the sky is so clear you can see the entire Milky Way every night. Her voice wavered on the last word, and Elliot gently squeezed her hand. They'll return, he said, with a conviction he didn't know where it came from. And when they do, you'll be wearing a necklace that represents exactly that, the promise that light always returns, even after the darkest night. Harper looked at him with silent gratitude, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. At that moment, Cynthia returned carrying a velvet box that seemed to contain the sky itself. When she opened it, the Aurora Promise necklace gleamed under the jeweler's lights like a captured fragment of dawn. The sky-blue sapphire pulsed with an almost ethereal brilliance, surrounded by small diamonds arranged in a pattern reminiscent of sunrise rays. The white gold chain was delicate but strong, made to last generations. Harper released a breath that contained all the wonder of the universe. It's perfect, she whispered. It's exactly like I dreamed. Cynthia lifted the necklace carefully, draping it over a black velvet display stand. The sapphire caught the overhead lights and threw blue fire across Harper's face, painting her features in shades of hope. The sapphire was mined in Sri Lanka 50 years ago, Cynthia said, her professional training reasserting itself. Found at dawn, according to the original documentation, my predecessor, Mr. Reed's father, purchased it from the miner himself, who believed the stone carried the promise of new beginnings. Aurora Promise, Harper murmured, reaching out tentatively. Promise of dawn. Would you like to try it on? Elliot asked gently. Harper's hand froze mid-air. She looked up at him, then at Marianne, uncertainty flickering across her face. I can? She asked, her voice small again. Sweetheart, you can buy it if you choose to, Marianne said, kneeling beside her. Your parents left this choice for you. Whatever you decide, they'd be proud, from the second-floor office. Lawson Reed watched through the glass partition. At 67, he'd built his jewelry empire through a combination of business acumen and genuine love for the stories each piece carried. Silver hair perfectly combed, three-piece navy suit, and grey eyes that missed nothing. He'd been summoned by Rachel 20 minutes earlier via urgent text. Delicate situation in main salon, child client with suspicious high-value card. But observing through the glass, Lawson saw nothing suspicious. He saw a child with dignity, a protective aunt, Elliot Warner, a loyal customer for years, demonstrating genuine kindness, and he saw his staff, especially Vivian and Cynthia, revealing exactly the type of prejudice he despised. He pressed the intercom button. Cynthia, my office now. Below, Cynthia's face paled at her employer's voice. She knew Rachel had sent the message, trying to protect the store, but now realized how it would sound. Miss Lane, Cynthia said with a tense smile, please make yourself comfortable. I'll return shortly. As the manager left, Vivian approached Harper again, this time with forced humility that didn't reach her eyes. But Elliot stepped between them smoothly, his body language protective without being aggressive. Why don't we give Harper some space, he suggested, his tone pleasant but firm. Harper barely noticed the exchange. Her entire focus had narrowed to the necklace before her, the way the sapphire seemed to hold an entire sky, the delicate craftsmanship of the diamond setting, the subtle weight of promise it represented. Marianne lifted the necklace carefully and fastened it around Harper's neck. The clasp clicked softly, a sound like a door closing on one chapter and opening another. Harper touched the pendant where it rested against her collarbone, feeling the cool smoothness of the stone, warm gradually against her skin. She caught her reflection in the mirror behind the display case, a small girl in a simple dress. But the necklace transformed her, made her look like someone worthy of dreams. "How does it feel?" Marianne asked, her voice thick with emotion. Harper turned to her aunt, and the smile that broke across her face was pure sunlight, like wearing a little piece of sky. 3 weeks had passed since that transformative day at Lawson Reed Jewelers. The story of Harper had spread quietly. Elliot had shared it with his wife, who'd mentioned it at her book club. And from there it floated through Manhattan like petals on the wind. Harper wore the Aurora Promise every day. Marianne had initially protested. "It's too valuable to wear to school, sweetheart." But Harper insisted. "My parents left this to give me hope every day, not just on special occasions." And something magical happened. At school, Harper, who'd always been a quiet child often overlooked, began to shine. Not because of the necklace itself, but because it gave her courage. She raised her hand more in class, defended classmates who were bullied, smiled more. In her 4th grade classroom, chalk dust floated through afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. The smell of peanut butter sandwiches lingered from lunch, mixed with the musty scent of old textbooks and floor wax. Mrs. Martinez noticed the change during science class, when they were studying constellations. "Harper, can you tell us about the Southern Cross?" the teacher asked, pointing to the diagram on the blackboard. Harper stood, the Aurora Promise catching light as she moved. "The Southern Cross is visible from the Southern Hemisphere. My parents can see it every night in Mozambique. They wrote that the sky there is so clear, you can see colors in the Milky Way, blues and purples and golds." Her voice had gained strength over the weeks. No longer the timid whisper of before. "That's beautiful, Harper," Mrs. Martinez said warmly. "Maybe you can share more of your parents' letters sometime?" But not all attention was positive. Emily Chen sat 3 rows back. Her pencil gripped so tightly her knuckles were white. She'd been the smartest girl in class before Harper started participating. Now everyone wanted to hear Harper's stories, see Harper's necklace, be Harper's friend. During recess, Emily stood with 2 other girls by the chain-link fence, watching Harper push Danny Morrison on the swing set. Danny was a timid boy who'd been bullied relentlessly until Harper started sitting with him at lunch. "My mom says that necklace is probably fake," Emily announced, loud enough for several nearby kids to hear. "Nobody's parents give them something worth that much." "It's real," Keisha Washington said. Coming to Harper's defense, Keisha was sharp-witted and fiercely loyal to her friends. "My aunt works in jewelry. She saw the story in the newspaper." "Then her parents are stupid," Emily shot back. "Leaving a kid with that much money and running off to Africa." The words carried across the playground. Harper heard them, but didn't turn around, just kept pushing Danny higher, her small hands gripping the swing's chains. Across town, in the basement inventory room of Lawson Reed, Rachel Monroe counted diamond earrings with mechanical precision. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light. The smell of metal polish and cardboard boxes filled the windowless space. She'd been relegated to inventory after her premature message about Harper. Lawson hadn't fired her. He rarely fired employees on first offense, but he'd made his disappointment clear. Meanwhile, Cynthia had been promoted to Director of Client Relations, with a salary increase. The irony tasted like poison. Rachel had worked at Lawson Reed for 10 years, 10 years of arriving early. Staying late, missing family gatherings for holiday rush seasons, she lived in a tiny studio apartment in Queens that consumed half her salary. At 34, she was single, exhausted, and invisible. And then a 9-year-old girl walks in and gets more attention in 1 hour than Rachel had received in a decade. The narrative Rachel constructed was seductive in its simplicity. She was the victim. Harper was a spoiled child with rich parents. Cynthia was an incompetent rewarded for failure. And she, Rachel, was ignored despite years of dedication. Such narratives, fed by resentment, rarely respect truth. It was on a rainy Thursday in April when Rachel's phone rang with an unknown number. She glanced around the empty inventory room before answering. Lawson Reed, Rachel speaking. Hello. The voice on the other end was female. Young, eager. My name is Jessica Hartwell. I'm a reporter with the Manhattan Daily Post. I'm working on a story about the girl with the necklace, Harper Lane. Rachel's heart accelerated. A flush spreading up her neck. Yes, I heard the story through a friend who was in the store that day. It's a beautiful story, really, but my editor is interested in another angle. Jessica hesitated. Was there any proper verification of the money's origin? I mean, parents who leave $500,000 for a 9-year-old child and then disappear into Africa, it seems unusual. The poisonous seed in Rachel's heart bloomed instantly. It is very unusual, Rachel agreed, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Honestly, several of us had doubts, but Mr. Reed was so enchanted with the whole story that he didn't want to investigate further. It was a lie. Lawson had personally verified every detail with the bank, so there are legitimate doubts about the transaction. Jessica's voice animated, journalistic instinct sharpening. Rachel hesitated for half a second. There was a line here, and she knew it, a line between professional frustration and genuine malice, between venting and sabotage. She crossed it. Look, I shouldn't be talking about this, Rachel said, injecting reluctance into her voice. But there are rumors about the family, about the money, about where it really came from. What kind of rumors? Some of us heard that her parents aren't humanitarians at all, that they were actually fleeing financial investigations here in the United States, pyramid schemes, something like that. And they left the girl with her aunt and an account full of money from dubious origins. Jessica breathed deeply on the other end. Do you have proof of this? Not personally. Rachel was improvising now, building a narrative of lies. But one of the other salespeople, Vivian, said she recognized the Lane surname from a news story about financial fraud last year. Something about fake investments in African projects. Every word was invented, every detail fabricated, but Jessica didn't know that. This is explosive, the reporter murmured. Can I attribute this to you? God. No. Rachel sounded appropriately alarmed. I'd lose my job. Please use it as an anonymous source. But I think someone needs to ask the hard questions. That girl is parading around with $250,000 around her neck, and nobody questions where it came from. When the call ended, Rachel felt a toxic mixture of satisfaction and nausea. Part of her knew she'd just done something terrible, but the larger part, the part poisoned by years of frustration and envy, whispered justifications. I'm just raising valid questions. If there's nothing wrong, an investigation will prove it. I'm protecting the jeweler's reputation. The lies we tell ourselves are always the most dangerous. She returned to counting earrings, but her hands shook slightly, and she had to restart 3 times. Friday morning arrived with the weight of iron clouds pressing down on Manhattan. Marianne Collins walked into the teacher's lounge at Brooklyn Elementary, the smell of burnt coffee and chalk dust greeting her like an old friend. She was reaching for her favorite mug, chipped at the rim, a gift from Harper 2 Christmases ago, when she noticed the silence. 3 colleagues sat at the corner table, the Manhattan Daily Post spread before them. They looked up at Marianne with expressions ranging from embarrassment to morbid curiosity. Marie, Janet Cho said carefully, her fingers gripping her coffee cup. Have you seen today's paper? Marianne's stomach dropped even before she saw the headline, $250K necklace on 9-year-old raises questions about fund origins, the article. Belined by Jessica Hartwell, Sprawled across the front page with a photo of Lawson and Reed's storefront, Marianne's hands trembled as she read, the newsprint ink smudging her fingers. Harper Lane, 9, has been seen at a Brooklyn public school wearing the Aurora Promise, a necklace valued at $250,000, allegedly purchased with funds left by her parents before departing for humanitarian work in Africa. But investigations raised disturbing questions about Sarah and Thomas Lane, whose current whereabouts have been unknown for 2 years. Sources within Lawson and Reed Jewelers, where the purchase was made, expressed concern about inadequate verification of fund origins. There were legitimate doubts, said an employee under condition of anonymity, but nobody wanted to ask the hard questions. Public records show Thomas Lane briefly worked in investments before supposedly changing careers to humanitarian work, a transition that financial fraud experts say is a classic red flag for money laundering. The words blurred. Marianne gripped the table's edge, her knuckles white. This is lies, she whispered, all lies. But Principal Patterson was already in the doorway, the same newspaper folded under her arm. Her expression grave. Marianne, we need to talk. At Harper's school, the morning bell rang at 8:15, its familiar clang echoing through corridors decorated with construction paper flowers and handprint turkeys left over from Thanksgiving. Harper sat at her desk in Mrs. Martinez's classroom, arranging her pencils by color, a habit that calmed her nerves. The Aurora Promise rested against her chest, warm from her body heat. She touched it occasionally. A small gesture of reassurance. Emily Chen arrived late, clutching a printed copy of the article her mother had shown her at breakfast. Her eyes found Harper immediately, a cruel light dancing in them. During morning recess, Emily gathered a crowd by the jungle gym. Harper was on the swing set with Danny, her legs pumping to gain height, when Emily's voice cut through the playground noise. "My mum says your parents are criminals," Emily announced. Loud enough for a dozen children to hear. "Says they stole money and ran away." Harper's feet dragged against the rubber mat beneath the swings, bringing her to an abrupt stop. Her stomach clenched. "That's not true," she said, her voice small against the sudden attention. "It is. It's in the newspaper." Emily waved the printed pages. "You're the daughter of thieves." Other children began gathering. Drawn by the scent of drama, the way sharks sense blood in water. "Thieves, your necklace is stolen. Your parents are criminals." 10-year-old Marcus Johnson, who'd never liked Harper anyway, picked up a small stone and threw it. It missed, but the intent was clear. Harper slid off the swing, tears streaming down her face, and ran toward the school building. The Aurora Promise bounced against her chest as she ran, its weight suddenly feeling like chains. She locked herself in the girls' bathroom, sliding down the cold tile wall until she was huddled on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. Sobs shook her small frame. Mrs. Martinez found her 20 minutes later, alerted by Keisha, who'd refused to join the mob. "Harper, sweetheart." The teacher knelt outside the stall. "Please open the door." "My parents aren't criminals." Harper's voice was hoarse from crying. "They're heroes. They're helping children. Why are people saying these things?" Mrs. Martinez's heart broke at the rawness in that small voice. "Because sometimes people spread lies. Honey, and lies can travel faster than truth across Manhattan." At Lawson and Reed Jewelers, Lawson had returned from Chicago to a media circus. News vans blocked Fifth Avenue, reporters with microphones camped outside the entrance. His personal cell phone rang incessantly. Journalists, concerned clients, competitors pretending concern while savoring his trouble. He convened an emergency meeting in the conference room. The staff filed in silently. Cynthia, Vivian, Rachel, and 3 other salespeople. The smell of fear was palpable, sharp as ammonia. "Who spoke to the press?" Lawson's voice was ice, controlled, more frightening than any shout. "Silence. I'll ask once more, who provided information about the Lane family to Jessica Hartwell?" Rachel felt everyone's eyes eventually turn toward her. Cynthia especially watched with narrowed eyes. She'd known Rachel for years, knew her resentments. Rachel, Lawson's voice was a blade. I just answered questions. Rachel tried to defend herself. Her voice shaking. She called me. I didn't seek out the press. And what did you say? I only... There were legitimate concerns. What concerns? Lawson slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. I personally verified everything with the bank. The trust fund is legitimate. The Lanes are recognized humanitarians working with a certified international organization. Everything was verified before I allowed that transaction. Rachel had gone pale as milk. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Cynthia cut in, standing abruptly. You invented an entire narrative based on envy and resentment. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Cynthia was trembling with rage. You destroyed an innocent child's reputation because you were jealous, because I got promoted and you didn't, because that girl received attention you thought should be yours. Rachel started crying, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Lawson took a deep breath, regaining control. You're fired. Clean out your desk and leave. Now, Mr. Reed, please. Now. But the damage was done. Firing Rachel wouldn't erase the headlines, wouldn't recall the printed newspapers, wouldn't silence the whispers spreading through the city like poison in veins. That evening, Marianne held Harper as the girl cried on their apartment's worn sofa. The news had spread like wildfire. Parents were calling the school demanding Harper be removed. Neighbors stared with suspicion. Cruel messages appeared on social media. The Aurora promise lay on the coffee table, its brilliance now seeming like a burden instead of a promise. Aunt Marie, Harper sobbed. I just wanted something to remind me of them. I just wanted hope. I know, baby, I know. Why are people so mean? Marianne had no answer. She just held her niece tighter, her own tears falling silently into Harper's hair. 2 weeks in hell. Principal Patterson sat across from Marianne in her office, the morning light filtering through dusty Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across her desk. The smell of old coffee and photocopy toner hung in the air. Marianne, you understand the difficult position the school is in, Patterson began, adjusting her glasses nervously. We have concerned parents. There are insurance implications, reputation concerns. You're asking Harper to leave. Marianne didn't phrase it as a question, just a flat statement of fact. I'm suggesting it might be better for everyone, especially for Harper, if she studied at home for a while, until things calm down. Until things calm down. Marianne's voice was dangerously calm. You're punishing an innocent child for lies other people spread about her. It's not punishment, it's protection. It's cowardice, Marianne cut in, standing. And when Harper asks me why she can't go to the school she loves anymore, to the class where she'd finally made friends, I'll tell her exactly that. Cowardice. She left without looking back, her hands shaking as she pushed through the office door into the hallway where children's artwork decorated bulletin boards. A mockery of innocence. Harper accepted the news with a quietness that broke Marianne's heart more than tears would have. It's okay, Aunt Marie, the girl said, sitting on her bed, hugging a worn teddy bear. I understand. Nobody wants the criminal's daughter around. Don't say that. Marianne knelt beside the bed. Your parents are heroes, and you're the bravest child I know. Then why does it feel like I did something wrong? Harper's voice finally wavered. I just wanted a pretty necklace. Why is that so bad? Marianne had no answer. She just held her niece as the darkness of injustice pressed down on them both. At Lawson Reed, sales had plummeted 40% in the first week following the article. The showroom floor felt cavernous and empty, the usual gentle murmur of wealthy clients replaced by echoing silence. 2 suppliers had sent letters threatening to terminate contracts if the Lane controversy wasn't resolved. Lawson had hired a public relations firm and a lawyer specializing in defamation. Both gave the same frustrating advice. Legal proceedings will take months, maybe years, and suing a newspaper for defamation is extremely difficult. Cynthia sat in her office. Now officially the Director of Client Relations, a promotion that tasted like ash. Through the glass partition, she could see Vivian arranging a diamond display with mechanical movements, her usual vivacity dimmed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Vivian stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee, looking 10 years older than she had 3 weeks ago. "May I come in?" Cynthia gestured to the chair. "How are you holding up?" Vivian asked, and for the first time since they'd worked together, sounded genuinely concerned, rather than professionally polite. "Exhausted, guilty, furious," Cynthia sighed. "Pick one." "Me too." Vivian stared at her hands. "I keep thinking, if I'd been kinder that first day, if I'd treated Harper with the dignity she deserved from the beginning, maybe Rachel wouldn't have felt justified in—" She didn't finish the sentence. "We can't change the past," Cynthia said softly. "We can only try to do differently now. But how do we fix this?" Before Cynthia could answer, Lawson appeared in the doorway, his expression showing something neither woman could quite decipher, not happiness, but not the despair of recent days either. "Elliot Warner is here," he announced, "and he brought someone interesting." In the main salon, Elliot stood accompanied by an African-American woman in her 50s. Her graying hair in elegant braids, intelligent eyes behind red-framed glasses. She wore a professional suit, but carried a worn briefcase, the mark of someone who worked in the field, not just offices. "Lawson, this is Dr. Amara Okonkwo," Elliot introduced. "She directs Safe Villages International, the organization Sarah and Thomas Lane work for." Lawson shook her hand, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "Doctor, it's an honor." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Reed." Her voice carried a slight accent that blended Nigerian English with years in the United States. "And I deeply regret that the reputation of 2 of my best workers and their innocent niece has been tarnished by irresponsible journalism." She placed her briefcase on the counter and began removing documents. "Sarah and Thomas Lane are physicians, both graduated from Columbia University. 2 years ago, they answered our call to establish a rural clinic in Nampula Province, Mozambique. They renounced lucrative careers, left behind comfort and safety to treat communities that haven't seen doctors in generations." She spread out photos. Sarah Lane treating a child's infected wound. Thomas Lane teaching hygiene practices to a group of women, both smiling, covered in dust but radiant. "These are your criminals," Dr. Okonkwo said, her voice dripping with bitter sarcasm. "These are the supposed fraudsters, people who live in a 2-room hut with intermittent electricity, treating malaria, cholera, and malnutrition without rest." Cynthia covered her mouth with her hand, tears springing to her eyes. "As for the money," Dr. Okonkwo continued, "Sarah and Thomas sold their home in Westchester and accumulated investments from years of work. They established a trust fund for Harper before departing. Because they knew they'd be unreachable for long periods, they left the child in the care of Thomas's sister, Marianne, with specific instructions. When Harper turned 9, she could choose something meaningful. A gift, a promise." Lawson sat heavily in a chair, the weight of the injustice settling on his shoulders. "Why haven't they come forward before to refute the allegations?" "Because they're in remote Mozambican bush country without reliable communication," Dr. Okonkwo explained. "I managed to send them a message via radio 3 days ago. Their response arrived yesterday." She withdrew a folded paper from the briefcase. "This is a letter from Sarah to Harper. They asked me to deliver it personally." Elliot took the letter with reverence, feeling the paper's texture, slightly rough, as if it had traveled through dust and heat to reach them. "They know about the article?" he asked quietly. "They know," Dr. Okonkwo's voice softened, "and they're devastated, but they can't leave, not yet. There's a cholera epidemic in the region. If they depart now, hundreds will die." The silence that followed was heavy with the cruel reality. Sarah and Thomas needed to choose between defending their daughter and saving strangers on the other side of the world, and they'd chosen both, in the only way they could. "We need to take this public," Lawson said finally. "We need a press conference." Already arranged, Elliot informed him. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my wife has contacts at 3 news networks. They'll be there. Dr. Okonkwo nodded. But before anything, this letter needs to reach Harper. When the doorbell rang at Marianne's small apartment at 7 that evening, she answered cautiously. Journalists had tried to force interviews every day. Through the peephole, she saw Lawson, Elliot, and a woman she didn't recognize. Mrs. Collins, Lawson said gently when she opened the door. I'm sorry to appear unannounced, but we have something important. Marianne let them in. Harper sat on the sofa doing homework. Marianne had taken over homeschooling with fierce determination. When Harper saw the visitors, especially Elliot, her eyes brightened slightly, like a candle flame flickering back to life. Mr. Elliot? Hello, little warrior. Elliot knelt beside her. I brought someone who knows your parents. Harper's entire body went rigid with hope and fear intermingled. Dr. Okonkwo stepped forward, her own tears shining. Harper Lane, she said softly. My name is Amara. I work with your mother and father in Mozambique. Harper dropped her pencil, her hands gripping the sofa cushions. Are they okay? They're well, Dr. Amara smiled. Tired but well, and they asked me to give you this. She extended the envelope. On it, in familiar cursive handwriting, was written, For our Harper, our light, our promise. With fingers that could barely hold the paper steady, Harper opened it. The letter was written on thin paper, the kind used in rural areas where supplies are scarce. Some words were slightly smudged. As if tear-stained, Harper read aloud, her voice breaking. Our dear Harper, if you're reading this, then things have gotten difficult there. We're so sorry, my love. Sorry we're not there to protect you. But we need you to know something very important. Nothing they're saying is true. We're not criminals. We didn't steal from anyone. Every penny of that fund came from years of hard work, saving, planning a future for you. Her voice failed. Marianne moved to sit beside her, one arm around her shoulders. Dr. Amara knelt on the floor in front of them. The letter continued, explaining the house sale. The choice to serve others. The impossible decision to leave their daughter. It talked about the 247 children they'd treated, the 89 lives saved with certainty. And each of these children reminds us of you, your kindness, your courage, your light. When Harper finished reading, she held the letter against her chest, her face wet with tears. But these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. She looked at Dr. Amara. They're really saving children. Hundreds of them, sweetheart, Amara confirmed. Your father operated on a girl your age last week, appendicitis. She would have died if he hadn't been there. Harper clutched the letter tighter. And for the first time in 2 weeks, she smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face from sorrow to hope. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth. But tonight, Harper Lane had her parents' words. And that was enough. The press conference was scheduled for the main salon of Lawson Reed at 2 p.m. on a sun-drenched Tuesday. Elliot had used his connections to ensure attendance from reputable media outlets, not sensationalist tabloids, but serious journalists from the New York Times, CNN, and NPR. The salon had been reorganized. Display cases were covered with velvet curtains to focus attention. A long table positioned at the front held chairs for Lawson Reed, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, Marianne Collins, and in the center, a small chair for Harper Lane. In Lawson's office, Harper sat waiting, wearing a simple navy blue dress Marianne had purchased for the occasion. And around her neck, gleaming against the dark fabric, was the Aurora promise. Are you nervous? Elliot asked, having appointed himself Harper's unofficial guardian. A little, Harper admitted. I've never talked in front of so many people. You don't have to say much, Dr. Amara assured her. You just need to be there. Be yourself. Let people see who you really are. And who am I? Harper asked with the disarming sincerity of children. Amara knelt beside her. You're the daughter of heroes, but more than that, you're someone who chose kindness even when treated with cruelty, forgave even when hurt, kept hope even when the world tried to steal it. That's who you are. Harper absorbed the words, then nodded with determination that seemed too large for such a small body. Outside, the salon filled rapidly. 23 journalists, 12 cameras, countless microphones, but there were also others. Neighbors from Marianne's building who'd come to show support, Mrs. Martinez, who'd taken the day off to be present, long-time customers of the jeweler who knew Lawson Reed's character and refused to believe the headlines. And in the back, trying to go unnoticed, stood Jessica Hartwell. Her eyes were wide and ringed with dark circles. In recent weeks, she'd discovered the truth, too late, and the guilt was consuming her. Lawson approached the microphone first, adjusting it to his height. "Good afternoon, thank you for coming. 2 weeks ago, a defamatory article was published about a 9-year-old child and her parents. Today we present the truth." He gestured to Dr. Okonkwo, who approached the microphone with the natural authority of someone who'd spent decades defending the invisible. "My name is Dr. Amara Okonkwo. I'm Executive Director of Safe Villages International, a non-profit organization operating in 17 countries. Sarah and Thomas Lane have been essential members of our team for 2 years." She clicked to remote control. And a screen behind her illuminated with photographs. Sarah Lane, with a stethoscope, examining a malnourished child. Thomas Lane, teaching water purification techniques to adolescents, both covered in sweat and dust, smiling despite exhaustion. "These are the criminals." Amara's voice dripped with sarcasm. "People who gave up lucrative careers in New York to live in a 2-room hut without air conditioning, intermittent running water, and electricity for only 4 hours daily." She changed the slide. Official documents appeared. Property deeds, donation receipts, trust fund documentation, all bearing official seals and lawyers' signatures. Every penny has been tracked, every transaction documented. There are no schemes, no pyramids, just 2 extraordinary human beings who chose sacrifice over comfort. She paused, letting the information settle like dust after a storm. "And there's a 9-year-old girl who was crucified in the media for having parents who care as much about strangers as their own daughter." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some cameras turned toward Jessica Hartwell, who'd gone pale as paper. Lawson returned to the microphone. Harper's trust fund had specific instructions. When she turned 9, she could choose something meaningful, a gift symbolizing hope. She chose a jewel from this store. The transaction was completely legitimate, verified by me personally before approval. He paused, his eyes scanning the journalists' faces. "But there was an employee of this store who, for personal reasons I won't speculate publicly about, provided false information to the press. That employee was terminated immediately, and we're considering legal action." Some hands rose, questions being prepared, but Marianne approached the microphone before anyone could speak. "I'd like to say something." Her voice trembled initially but gained strength. "My niece is the kindest, bravest, most beautiful child I know. When she was humiliated in this store, she forgave. When she was ridiculed at school, she held her head high. And when lies were spread about the parents she can barely remember, she didn't lose faith." Tears ran freely down Marianne's face. "Sarah and Thomas Lane couldn't be here today because they're saving lives. Literally saving lives. There's a cholera epidemic in the region where they work. If they leave now, children will die. So they make the impossible choice no parent should have to make. Trust that truth will eventually prevail. And continue the work they swore to do." She looked directly at the cameras. "To everyone who shared those lies, who judged without questioning, who taught their children to bully an innocent girl, I hope you feel shame. Deep shame. Absolute silence. Then Elliot stood. "I was in the jeweler the day Harper purchased the necklace. I witnessed the discrimination she suffered for wearing simple clothes, and I witnessed her grace in forgiving. She's 9 years old, and demonstrated more character than many adults in this room." He looked specifically at the area where journalists sat. "Journalism should seek truth, not sensation. Should protect the vulnerable, not destroy them for clicks. What happened to Harper Lane wasn't journalism. It was cruelty, disguised as investigation." Lawson made a gesture toward his office door. "Harper, will you come here? Please." The office door opened, and Harper Lane entered the salon. She looked tiny under the bright lights, in her simple dress and carefully braided hair, but the aurora promise around her neck captured light in a way that seemed almost supernatural. Camera clicks exploded, flashes fired like lightning. Harper walked to the table with small but steady steps. Marianne pulled out the chair for her, and the girl climbed up, her feet barely touching the floor. For a long moment, she just looked at the cameras, the unfamiliar faces, the sea of attention that had caused so much suffering. Then she spoke, her voice soft but surprisingly clear in the microphone. "My name is Harper Lane. I'm 9 years old and my parents are heroes." Complete silence. "They're not criminals. They didn't steal from anyone. They're in Africa saving children who don't have doctors. They left me and Aunt Mari to help strangers because that's what good people do." Her voice wavered slightly, but she continued, "When people were mean to me these past weeks, it was very hard. Kids at school called me the daughter of thieves. Parents wouldn't let their children play with me. People at the market stared and whispered." Tears began streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. "But my mom wrote me a letter, and she said truth doesn't need to be loud to be real. It just needs time." Harper touched the necklace around her neck. "This necklace is called Aurora Promise, Promise of Dawn. It means after the darkest night, there's always a sunrise. My parents believe that. I believe that." She looked directly at the cameras, her enormous brown eyes shining. "And I forgive the people who spread lies. Because holding anger is too heavy to carry. And my parents taught me to be light, to be kind, even when it hurts." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Then something happened that no one expected. Jessica Hartwell stood from the back of the room. Her face was wet with tears, her voice broken. "Harper," she called, and all eyes turned. "My name is Jessica Hartwell. I wrote the article that spread those lies about you and your parents." A collective murmur of shock. Jessica took trembling steps forward. "I didn't verify my facts. I trusted an anonymous source acting out of malice. I chose sensationalism over truth because it would sell more papers. Because it would advance my career." She stopped a few meters from Harper, unable to approach closer. "And in doing so, I destroyed you, destroyed your parents' reputation, caused immeasurable pain to an innocent child." Her voice broke completely. "There's no excuse, no justification. I failed in everything a journalist should be, and I'm sorrier than words can express." Harper looked at her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, she climbed down from her chair and walked to Jessica. The 9-year-old extended her small hand. "My teacher says recognizing a mistake is the first step to fixing it," Harper said. "Thank you for recognizing." Jessica fell to her knees, sobbing, holding Harper's hand as if it were a lifeline. "You're extraordinary," she whispered. "You're so much better than I'll ever be." Harper, with children's strange wisdom, replied, "You can be better tomorrow than you are today. That's what dawns are for." The next day's headlines would be very different from the previous ones. 3 months had passed since the press conference that changed everything. The Manhattan Daily Post had published a full-page retraction, personally written by Jessica Hartwell, not just admitting error, but detailing exactly how inadequate source verification, rush for a headline, and lack of journalistic integrity had created devastating injustice. The editor-in-chief had been forced to resign. Editorial policies were completely revised. Jessica, surprisingly, wasn't fired. Instead, she was transferred to a new rectification journalism section, a team dedicated to investigating and correcting problematic past reporting. She accepted the position with humility, knowing it would take years to rebuild credibility, but the deepest impact had been on Harper. The girl who forgave had gone viral, but this time positively. Appearances on morning shows, magazine articles about childhood kindness, a private Manhattan school had offered full scholarship. But Harper, after talking extensively with Marianne, had refused. "I like my public school," she'd explained. Mrs. Martinez is an amazing teacher, and my real friends are there, the ones who stayed even when it was hard. Principal Patterson had personally visited Marianne's apartment to apologize and beg Harper to return. The girl accepted with grace, but not without establishing conditions. "I'll come back," Harper told the woman who'd expelled her, "but only if you promise you'll never send away a child again because people are saying bad things about them. Because children deserve to be protected, not punished for gossip." The principal, flushed with shame, promised. It was a warm July afternoon when Marianne's phone rang with an unknown international number. Her heart raced. She knew what it could be. Hello, static, then a weak voice, distorted by thousands of miles and poor connection. "Marie, it's Sarah." Marianne needed to sit, her legs failing. Sarah, oh my God! Connections bad, can only talk, few minutes. "Harper!" Marianne screamed. "Harper, come quick!" The girl appeared running from her bedroom, eyes wide. "It's your mother," Marianne whispered. Handing over the phone with trembling hands, Harper took the device as if it were the most fragile thing in the world. "Mom." Her voice was a frightened whisper. The answer came weak but unmistakable. "My darling, Harper, my love." And Harper collapsed in tears, 2 years of accumulated longing pouring out at once. "Are you okay? Is Dad okay? When are you coming back? I missed you so much." People said terrible things, but I knew they weren't true. I always knew. Words gushed in a torrent between sobs. Sarah's voice, even distorted, carried equal emotion. Well, sweetheart. And we're coming back 3 weeks, got replacement. We're going home to you." Harper couldn't respond, only cried and laughed simultaneously. "Saw your press conference. You were so brave, so proud. I wore the Aurora Promise, Mom. Every day it reminded me of you. Perfect. You're perfect. My Dawn." The connection began failing. Mom. 3 weeks. Love always." The line died. Harper held the dead phone against her chest, crying and smiling, her heart so full it seemed ready to overflow. Marianne embraced her, both laughing and crying together. "They're coming home," Harper whispered. "They're really coming home." In the 21 days that followed, Harper crossed off each day on the calendar with a red marker. Elliot and his wife Margaret visited regularly, bringing books and stories to distract her. Lawson Reed had become an almost grandfather figure in her life, occasionally taking her to the jeweler for design consultations, where she'd draw imaginary jewelry. But it was Dr. Amara who brought the most special surprise. "Harper," she said during a visit 1 week before Sarah and Thomas's return, "your parents asked me to show you something." She opened her laptop and clicked on a video. The screen showed a simple room, peeling concrete walls, a window through which golden afternoon light entered, and in the center, a woman wearing a white lab coat over simple clothes, brown hair pulled in a ponytail, kind eyes shining with exhaustion and love. "Sarah Lane." "Harper, my love," the recorded voice said, and Harper released a sob. "I know there are still a few days until we see each other, but I couldn't wait any longer to say this." Sarah smiled, tears running down her face. "You probably don't remember much about me. You were only 7 when we left, and I know that's my pain to carry, not yours. But I need you to know, every day away was an impossible choice. Every child we treated, we saw you. Every life we saved, we did it in your name." She wiped tears. "Aunt Marie sent us the video of the press conference. I watched it 5 times, and each time I became prouder of the incredible person you're becoming. Brave like your father, kind like, well, kinder than either of us ever were." Sarah picked up something off screen, a child's drawing, clearly made by one of the children she treated. "This is Amara. Not Dr. Amara, you know." Sarah laughed softly. "Another Amara, a little 6-year-old girl when we arrived here. She was dying of cerebral malaria, malnourished, without hope." She showed the drawing, a smiling child under a rainbow. "Today she goes to school, draws, dreams, lives, because of the work we do. Work we can only do because you, my dear brave girl, let us go." Sarah's voice broke. We're coming back now because it's time. Because you need us more than these children do. Because Safe Villages has trained local doctors who can continue the work. And because we die a little each day away from you." She touched the screen, as if she could reach through it. "When we see each other, I'll hug you and never let go. I'll learn every inch of how you've grown. I'll hear every story, and I'll spend every remaining day making up for these 2 stolen years." Sarah smiled through tears. "I love you more than there are words, Harper Lane, my dawn, my promise, my daughter." The video ended. Harper was crying so hard she couldn't breathe properly. Marianne held her. Dr. Amara joined the embrace. And the 3 stayed there, connected by love and loss and hope. The remaining days crawled by like wounded animals. Harper could barely sleep, barely eat. She practiced what she'd say to her parents 100 times. Changing words, adding details, subtracting unnecessary things. Marianne cleaned the apartment obsessively, as if making it perfect could somehow make up for 2 years of absence. And finally, the day arrived. JFK Airport was surprisingly quiet for a Sunday afternoon. Marianne and Harper arrived 2 hours early because Harper literally couldn't stay still at home. The girl wore her best dress, a new one Marianne had bought. Yellow like sunbeams, and around her neck, gleaming against the cheerful fabric, was the Aurora promise. "Will they recognize me?" Harper asked for the 10th time. "I've changed a lot, haven't I?" "You've grown," Marianne smiled. "But you're still there, Harper, you'll always be." Elliot and Margaret had come too, along with Lawson Reed, Dr. Amara, and surprisingly, even Cynthia and Vivian from the jeweler. Even Jessica Hartwell was there. Maintaining respectful distance, but wanting to witness the reunion her article had nearly destroyed, when the board announced, "Arriving, Flight 237 from Johannesburg via London." Harper gripped Marianne's hand hard enough to hurt. "They're here. They're really here." Minutes dragged like hours. Then the gate opened. Passengers began emerging, businessmen, families, students, and then a woman appeared, too thin, with deep circles under her eyes, wearing simple clothes and a worn backpack, hair grayer than in photos. But the eyes were the same. Sarah Lane beside her, an equally thin man, beard grown out, kind eyes searching and finding a 9-year-old girl in a yellow dress and a necklace that captured all the light in the terminal. Time stopped. Sarah dropped her backpack. Thomas let the duffel bag fall, and Harper ran like she'd never run in her life. Sneakers pounding on the cold airport floor, braids flying behind her, heart beating so loud it was all she could hear. "Mama! Papa!" Sarah fell to her knees, arms open. Thomas was right behind, enveloping both, and when Harper crashed into them, 3 hearts that had beaten separately for 2 long, cruel years, finally synchronized. "My girl," Sarah sobbed, kissing Harper's face repeatedly. "My beautiful, brave, perfect girl. You've grown so much." Thomas laughed and cried simultaneously. "You're so big. I missed you so much." Harper could barely speak between sobs. So much. "We did too, sweetheart, more than you can imagine." They stayed there in the middle of the arrivals terminal, embraced so tightly they became a single form. Passengers detoured around them, some smiling, some with tears in their own eyes. Marianne watched from a distance, crying openly, happy to finally share the weight she'd carried alone. Elliot held Margaret's hand. Both moved. Lawson Reed cleaned his glasses, pretending it was just dust. Jessica Hartwell observed with a mixture of genuine joy and eternal guilt, knowing she'd almost destroyed this moment. Finally, after an impossible-to-measure time, Sarah held Harper's face between her hands. "Let me look at you." She studied every detail, new freckles, the tooth that had grown in the empty space, hair length, clarity in the eyes, and the necklace. Sarah touched the Aurora promise gently. "You chose perfectly," she whispered. "It's exactly what you are, our promise of light. Dr. Amara told me about little Amara," Harper said. "The one who was sick." Sarah smiled. "She made a drawing for you. It's in my suitcase. And about all the other children you helped." Harper touched her mother's face with small hands. I understand now. I understand why you needed to go. I understand why you needed to stay. Thomas knelt beside them. You should never have had to understand that, sweetheart. You're too young to carry that weight. But I carry it, Harper said with simplicity, and it's okay, because you taught me that real love sometimes looks like distance. But it never is, because you were with me every day. Sarah and Thomas looked at each other, marveling. How did you get so wise? Sarah asked. Harper smiled, that smile that illuminated her entire face. I learned from my parents and from Aunt Marie and from Mr. Elliot and Mr. Lawson and Dr. Amara. I learned that hope is real, that kindness matters, and that after the darkest night, there's always a dawn. Sarah and Thomas completed together. They went home together, all three holding hands, the weight of separation finally lifting, like morning fog burned away by sunlight. 6 months had passed since the airport reunion. 6 months of rebuilding, relearning, rediscovering what it meant to be a family. The Lane apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Brooklyn, smelled of fresh coffee and slightly burnt pancakes. Sarah stood at the stove, spatula in hand, laughing as smoke rose from the pan. I'm out of practice, she admitted, scraping blackened edges off a pancake. That's okay, Mom, Harper said from the table, doing homework. I like them crispy. Thomas leaned against the doorway, watching his wife and daughter with an expression of quiet wonder, as if still unable to believe they were all together. Marianne visited 3 times a week for dinner, finally able to be just the aunt again, rather than the substitute mother. The weight of responsibility had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by simple joy. Sarah had resumed work as a physician at Brooklyn General Hospital, taking shifts in the emergency department. The work was exhausting but fulfilling in different ways than Mozambique. Here she could sleep in her own bed, wake up beside her husband, have breakfast with her daughter. Thomas taught tropical medicine at Columbia, while continuing remote consultations with safe villages. His classroom filled with students fascinated by field stories. The reality of medicine stripped of sterile American hospital comforts. Harper flourished, straight A student, solid circle of true friends, volunteering at the pediatric hospital on weekends. It was on a cold December morning when the Lane family gathered at Lawson Reed Jewelers. The bell chimed as they entered. Sarah and Thomas hand in hand, Harper between them, Marianne following. Lawson greeted them personally, conducting them to the salon where everything had begun. Harper has a special request, he explained. Smiling mysteriously, on the central table sat a velvet box. Since the press conference, Lawson began, sales of Aurora promise pieces have increased 300%. People from across the country want jewelry symbolizing hope and new beginnings. He looked at Harper. So we created an entire line called Harper's Promise. 10% of each sale goes to Safe Villages International to continue the work your parents began. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands. But Harper had another idea, Lawson continued. The girl stepped forward, her hands holding something. I want to donate the original Aurora Promise, she said clearly, to be auctioned, and all the money goes to build a school in Mozambique. A school where children like little Amara can learn and dream. Harper, Sarah began, that necklace is yours, your gift. I know, Harper smiled. That's why I can choose what to do with it, and the promise was never about having the jewel. It was about what it means, and it means more making a difference than hanging around my neck. Thomas knelt beside his daughter. Are you sure? Harper nodded. I already have the dawn I needed. She looked at her parents. At Marianne, at everyone gathered. You! There wasn't a dry eye in the salon. Lawson cleared his throat emotionally. The auction is scheduled for next week. We estimate raising about $500,000. Enough for a complete school with library, science lab, and maintenance funds for 10 years. Harper smiled, that smile that captured all the light in the room. How many children will be able to study there? At least 300 per year. Dr. Amara answered. She was also present. For generations. Then it's decided, Harper said with finality. She opened the box and removed the Aurora Promise one last time. The sky-blue sapphire gleamed under the lights, the surrounding diamonds capturing and multiplying each ray. Harper held the necklace against the light, memorizing it. "Thank you for reminding me that dawns always come," she whispered to the jewel. "Now go help other people remember that too." And with grace that defied her age, she placed the necklace back in the box and closed it. The auction the following week raised $547,000. Construction on Aurora Promise School began 3 months later in Nampula Province. Mozambique, 6 years later, on a warm afternoon in Nampula, Mozambique, a red brick school with a green roof gleamed under the African sun. Children in uniforms ran across the courtyard, their laughter ringing in multiple local languages: Portuguese, Makua, Lomwi. The smell of red earth and chalk filled the air. The texture of new walls already bore the marks of small hands, handprints in paint, scratches from games, the beautiful graffiti of childhood. Above the entrance door, a bronze plaque read, "Aurora Promise School, dedicated to all children who are promises of dawn, donated by Harper Lane, age 9. Because shared hope is multiplied hope." Inside the library, in a frame on the wall, hung a photograph, a small girl in a simple blue dress wearing a necklace that captured the sky. Around the photo, written by hundreds of children in dozens of languages, were the words, "Thank you for believing in us." Little Amara, now 12 years old, healthy and studying to become a doctor, showed the school to visitors, telling Harper's story with pride. In New York, Harper Lane was now 15, taller, with shorter hair, kind eyes that held the depth of experience. A small scar on her knee from a recent bicycle accident marked the normalcy of adolescent life. She was an honor student, volunteered at the pediatric hospital 3 times a week, had dinner with her noisy family where Sarah cooked, without burning things now, and Thomas told stories about his students. The smell of spices Sarah had learned to use in Mozambique filled their apartment. Music played on the kitchen radio, the taste of shared dessert, the texture of the wooden table where family gathered. "Remember when you used to burn everything?" Harper teased her mother. "I was out of practice," Sarah laughed. Throwing a dish towel at her daughter, Thomas shook his head, smiling. "Our house almost burned down twice that first month." Marianne, visiting for Friday dinner as always, added, "I have photographic evidence," in Harper's bedroom. She stood alone, looking at dawn, painting the sky gold and pink. She didn't wear the Aurora Promise anymore, hadn't for 6 years, but she carried its promise every day. Be kind even when it's hard. Choose hope even in darkness. Believe everyone has a story, and never forget that after the longest night, there's always a dawn. 10 years after the events, Lawson Reed sat for an interview with the New York Times. The article, titled "The Power of Promises: How One Child Changed a City," included his final quote, "Promises aren't about precious stones or monetary values. They're about choices we make when nobody's watching. Kindness we offer when there's no reward, and light we choose to be even when the world is dark." Harper Lane taught us that, at 9 years old, may we all learn the lesson. The sun rose over New York and over Mozambique simultaneously, connecting 2 worlds through a choice of multiplied kindness. In Aurora Promise School, the first bell of the day rang. 300 children filed into classrooms, opening books, raising hands, dreaming dreams that a 9-year-old girl in America had made possible. And in Brooklyn, Harper Lane closed her notebook, grabbed her backpack and headed to school. Just another teenager, except for the quiet knowledge that hope, once shared, never truly ends. It simply multiplies like dawn spreading across the earth, touching everything it reaches with the promise of light. What promise will you choose to be today? Every dawn is a chance to begin again.